My name is M. Jason Graham, and this is Writing. This is Writing is brought to you by mjgstorycreation.com. Go to mjgstorycreation.com and get started on turning your idea into an epic story today. So today I'm going to give you an example of what an outline should look like. We've already gone over the act structure and the outline structure for an adventure. So I'm going to give you the practical application of this as I have throughout my entire process. I have decided on a name, but don't quote me on it. It may not stick, but the name right now, the working title is The Consort for this film. This is a film. So, as always, we start with our guiding principles listed at the top. The theme being identity, the purpose to encourage the responsibility of self-definition, the expectation, the affirmation of the individual strengthens the community, the logline, a struggling actor is tricked into becoming a ASL instructor. The audience is men and women ages 25 to 40, and it is a comedy drama. So, Act 1 is capacity, so remember that we are showing what the characters are capable of in this first act. So, we start with our first bookend, which is kind of a snapshot of the world of our character as it stands now, and a metaphor for who he or she is. So, we are set up in a living room in a small one-bedroom apartment in Baldwin Hills, California. We have a man who is Dravon rush past the table with a stack of past due notices on them. We hear the shower turn on and then the man singing, and we follow along the wall in his apartment with an arrangement of photos. The first photo is a promotional shot for the television series, which shows a human family and one alien child. So if you remember, he is a former child star. And then the next pictures are Dravon, which is the name of our character, with various celebrities. In each of the subsequent pictures, as Dravon gets older, the celebrities are less and less famous until the final picture is Dravon with a young man close to half his age in a Walmart uniform. Illustrated purpose. We cut to a park where there is an old woman explaining the rules of chess to a group of children. At this moment, she is explaining the rule of how the pawn becomes a queen. Communities. We have 3 of them. Responsibilities and the stumbling block. So the first community, we are in a cramped office with a cramped waiting room. Sandy, an older white woman, sits behind a desk that is too large for the space. Dravon enters and plops on the edge of her desk. She starts shaking her head, and he convinces her finally to set up for him a convention in Canada. She then reminds him that nobody really likes him because of his behavior at past conventions, but she finally agrees to since none of the other cast members will be there. Second community, we're in a parking lot. We do kind of a close-up on the driver's side of a 15-year-old car. We see a 20-something attractive male with his head back. He's smoking weed. He is really enjoying himself. He is in ecstasy. His name is Dawson. It's the same person we see in the last picture in Dravon's living room. So we see Dawson has a camera and he's recording somebody giving him oral pleasure. When the recording is interrupted by a phone call with the name Maxwell on it. So Dawson taps the head of the person who is pleasing him, and the head pops up, and it's Dravon. So they have a conversation in sign language about the phone call. Dravon doesn't. We'll get to that later. They talk about a few other things. With Dawson saying that he needs some help with a couple of things, and so Dravon agrees, and then Dawson tells him that his break is almost over, go ahead and do that tongue thing I like. And Dravon goes back to work. So, The next thing we cut to is the third community. Dravon arrives at a party. Maxwell opens the door. He's late, and Maxwell is upset. It's an African party. Dravon hands Maxwell some paperwork that he needs for his children who are learning in Africa, but they are American. Uh, they're American kids. They're Maxwell's kids. So Dravon apologizes half-heartedly. Maxwell introduces him to his cousin, who is a tall, dark, and kind of average-looking man named Io. So Io pulls them aside, and he pulls Dravon aside and starts to ask him these off-the-wall questions about what it is to be gay. And so Dravon kind of goes off on him, but Io is just like amused more than he is irritated. And so Dravon gets a call or a text from Dawson and tries to excuse himself. When he does, Io and Maxwell get together and talk, and Io nods his head. Yeah, he's cool. I can work with him. So then here comes the shift. So the shift comes in, and the next morning, Maxwell shows up to Dravon's door with weed and vodka. He tells Dravon that his family is looking to produce a film that's a remake of Miracle Worker, but there's a catch, and Dravon must convince the overseas producer that he has a functional understanding of American Sign Language in order to win the role. So they talk about a bit of the specifics of it, and Dravon is not sure because he did not complete his ASL certification. So now we move into the adaptation. It turns out that Dawson is a graphic designer, and so Dravon makes a deal with Dawson in order to get him the fake credentials. Then Dravon has to pass a drug screening and a physical, and so Sandy helps him out with that. The interview is the only thing that can't really be faked, and so he doesn't do very well at that interview. So what ends up happening is they go out later that night to a bar, and they get very drunk. They get hammered, but then they witness one of the waiters being rude to a deaf couple that's at the bar, and so Dravon goes off. And so Maxwell, instead of intervening, he actually records the whole thing and sends it to Io. New opportunity. So a week later, what we have is Dravon receiving an email stating that he got the contract, and so he's kind of reading through it, not reading through it, but he's looking at like how much it's going to be and what the dates are and the fact that they sent him a plane ticket. And that's it, which is very important because that comes in later that he didn't actually read the contract. And so for the second bookend, which is the close to Act 1, Max walks Dravon to the security checkpoint at the airport. Dravon grabs an LA postcard from the gift shop, and when he does, somebody takes his picture and posts it on IG. So we'll continue later with Act 2. My name is M. Jason Graham, and this is Writing. This is Writing is brought to you by mjgstorycreation.com. Go to mjgstorycreation.com and get started on your idea and transforming it into an epic story today. I'll see you next time.